weekly program بالأحضان, a show with an accent for those without one. A lot of human rights violation is going on now, and been really ignored by the international community and the West. There was an international conference in Turkey, in Istanbul, of the first conference of international correlation of freedom and rights, and that really basically try to represent and eliminate some of this human rights violation around the globe. And we have a very special guest that he just came back from the conference. We have Bruce Nasser. He is a civil rights attorney. He's very active in human rights, and we have him here before. Welcome to Bulahdan, Bruce. It's very nice.
Thank you.
You get to go to Istanbul, and you get to meet a lot of intelligent people.
On a personal level, it was just a fascinating trip to meet people from Europe, throughout the Middle East, who are interested in human rights, who know a lot more than I do about it, and to see a fascinating city. So on a personal level, it was a magnificent opportunity.
You were looking for it. I know I talked to you before you leave, and also you didn't know exactly how this is going to transpire, but overall, you spent 4 or 5 days there, and you are here.
Yes. And it's really my third trip being involved in this work. I don't consider myself an expert on Egypt, but in 2007, I traveled to Egypt for the first time to observe military trials under the Mubarak regime of Muslim Brotherhood leaders, and then took another trip in the aftermath of the coup in November of 2013, and then this trip to participate in the conference.
So, well, since we talked about Egypt, and then we'll go back to the conference in Istanbul. When the court, the judiciary, becomes a political tool of a dictator, tell us what is the technical, mechanical, and how can the judiciary system that's supposed to protect people and protect human rights and becomes an oppressive tool? And that's what people accuse the court in Egypt and the judiciary system there.
And that's very much what we saw when I visited Egypt in November of 2013, and what participants in the conference emphasized is that under the Mubarak regime, the judiciary was really a tool of the security forces. There were some independence in the judges, but whenever there was any of that independence was expressed, they would just send people into the military court system. But even the civil court system was largely controlled by the security forces and working with the prosecution to carry out repression under the regime and to prevent the organizing of opposition. In that, many of that judiciary remained untouched through the Arab Spring and through the overthrow of Mubarak and the January Revolution, and remained in power even under President Mohamed Morsi. But as he tried to appoint other judges, there were maneuvering within the judiciary to keep those judges from taking power, or to claim that they weren't authorized to be involved, for instance, in overseeing the fair elections because they were partisan, although the judges from the old regime were somehow supposed to be neutral. And certainly what we've seen in the aftermath of the military coup of July of 2013 is that the judiciary is manipulated so that certain judges are assigned to political cases, certain judges are assigned to the security courts, and we see as a result of it these mass verdicts, for instance, where hundreds of people are sentenced to death after 20-minute hearings with no evidence being presented, and where the judiciary just becomes another tool of the prosecution and the security forces.
So when you politicize the justice system, as a judge or as a lawyer or as the institution itself, the judiciary institution itself, how do they look at themselves, and how does it function, and how does it affect the overall function of the judiciary system? I mean, if everybody think, I have to wait for, a lot of people talk about before the judge render any verdict, he has to wait for a call. And now it's becoming a hashtag judge waiting for a call.
And some of it I don't think even has to be that direct. I mean, when you're in a society, you figure out what the verdict is supposed to be, and you know why that particular case is in front of you. I think again, I don't profess to be an expert on Egypt in particular, but
But how does it affect the other ones, the perception of the institution as a tool for human rights and for enforcing the Constitution and the law?
I think it leads to widespread disrespect for any opportunity to work through the judicial system or through organizing, for change with the existing institutions of government. And certainly, people are doing that now. I mean, human rights organizations are being turned away from Egypt. Respected researchers aren't being allowed to enter the country. And human rights organizations in Egypt are shutting down because they feel the space to bring cases within the court system is so limited that there's really no opportunity for space domestically in the system to advocate for change and to criticize what's happening.
So, why would a dictator needs a constitution and needs, kind of judges and court and all? As a dictator, you can, at the end of the day, the Sisi can just do whatever he wants, or Mubarak, or Saddam, or whatever. So why would I always wonder about this, in general. I'm not picking up the Sisi because people think I do. But why a dictator needs a constitution?
Part of it is, I think, thinking somewhat of Egypt, but you'd still need to relate to the international community. So a week before my conference in Istanbul, President Sisi took his first international trip to Europe. And he was welcomed in Italy and welcomed in France by the government of France. This is after his regime had massacred thousands of people and had 45,000 people in prison and arrested journalists and shut down all peaceful dissent. He's welcomed in Italy because Italy wants to shut down immigration from North Africa. And so they want stability. And he needs to have some legitimacy. So you want to rule through a constitution, you want to have elections that might be sham elections, but you can at least say we had elections. You don't want to just summarily execute people. You want to be able to run them through a judicial system before you execute them to say this is the rule of law. He was welcomed in France, and France then was eager to sign military contracts, selling naval boats to Egypt. So part of it is how do you relate to an international community and claim legitimacy? And then there's still a need to try to claim some legitimacy within your society yourself, and not just through naked power, but to clothe that power in the trappings of a judicial system.
It's interesting you mentioned France and you mentioned Italy and how they, they welcome a dictator. They commit a lot of crimes and violating a lot of human rights and all that.
And just to be clear, this was a dictator that Human Rights Watch, which is a respected organization, issued a report just a month before, where they found that the massacres of peaceful protesters at Rabaa Square and other locations in Egypt were deliberately carried out and organized at the highest levels of the Egyptian military and security forces. These weren't individual officers shooting people out of reaction or fear, but a deliberate policy of leadership. That leader was then welcomed to France and Italy.
Okay, now we have, and I know we talked a lot about this before, about the attack of Charlie Hebdo satiric magazines and the tragedy of massacring 12 and the aftermath, the reaction of the West and the reaction of Europe and everybody talking this is assault on freedom of expression, assault on democracy, assault on Western civilization and all of that. If Italy and France given legitimacy to a dictator, would France and Italy and the United States also supporting that, we get any legitimacy?
I think that's what this conference ultimately was about, was trying to for instance, a torture report came out while I was at the conference. And I was very clear, I did not want to be in the position of someone from the United States lecturing the Middle East on how to bring democracy,
you have your own issue.
right? I mean, because we have to confront our own demons. But the conference was about not trying to impose a Western claim of democracy and human rights upon other societies, but how to liberate those societies, frankly, from much of the oppression that is supported from the West. And that's what's horrible about the events in France, is that they're used for propaganda.
Exactly. We'll come back to that. We'll just have a short break. We'll come back with Bruce Nestor about his trip to Istanbul. So, assalamu alaikum and God bless you all.